Welcome to MarketPulse, Pros and Pioneers. Each week, we talk with industry leaders in both marketing and entrepreneurship and business to find out all about their wins and failures in marketing. Right now, we'll hear all about their successes and wins and what's fallen flat so that you can take that knowledge and implement it. Learn from the best, from the folks who've been there and done it all, as well as people just like you. Thanks for joining us. This is MarketPulse, Pros and Pioneers.
And welcome to this week's MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers, where we try to help small to medium business owners find out more about what works in marketing, what doesn't, and how they can set themselves up for success for the future. And we've had some amazing guests on the show. We've had some real corkers. I am super proud to have with me today Todd Caponi, the one and only transparency expert, sales historian. You've got many, many titles these days, Todd. You're a sales nerd, ultimately, right?
Yep. Yeah, like we were joking about before we hit record, I'm to the point where my nerdery knows no bounds. So let's go, brother.
And obviously, to anybody who's out in the audience, I'm talking primarily to a CEO and founder audience or marketers who are looking to kind of upskill themselves. A lot of these people have never heard of you. No offense, Todd, but they've never heard of you. Right, you're primarily active in the sales sphere to companies who are doing a lot of outbound selling, who are doing a lot of inbound selling, larger enterprise businesses. So a little bit of background for anybody who doesn't know who Todd is. I first came across Todd about 5 years ago now, when I first ventured into the SaaS world and I was trying to figure out a little bit more about how I could be convincing as a salesperson. I heard Todd on a podcast, and the idea that he floated in that podcast was around transparency and how being transparent as a salesperson is not just a nice thing to do, but it's very helpful to your prospect that you're talking to and also to your own pipeline, your own business. I took that, I bought the book, I listened to the book, I read the book, and then I tried to get hold of Todd because I was like, oh my God, holy shit. This is fundamentally something I really believe in. And there's a lot of second-hand car salesmen in the SaaS world. There's a lot of snake oil. There's a lot of bad actors. But there are some really good, nice, decent people who find it really hard to differentiate themselves. And Todd, responded to me. He came on. This is the third time I've interviewed you now, Todd, on different podcasts as well. That's going to be a record, right? That's going to be a record.
Yep.
So Todd background, he's obviously the author of The Transparency Sale, which was the first book that I read. He's then gone on to release the Transparent Sales Leader. You're an international bestseller on both of those books. You have some amazing background in terms of the companies that you've worked for, from Salesforce to Power Reviews. I had to dig deep there. Power Review, but both of those companies, back when they were, before anybody knew who they were, before anybody knew what was going on, you were there and you took them to that next level. You've since, you've started Sales Melon. You travel the world, giving keynote speeches at SaaS conferences to salespeople. You're the founder of the Sales History podcast, which is ultimate sales nerdery. And somehow I've managed to get you onto a podcast all about marketing. People at home are going to be sat here going, all right, what the hell, Paul? Why am I listening to this? So you and I both know that sales and marketing are two sides of the same coin. But before I get started in all of that, how have you been since we last spoke? What's your crazy world like right now, and where are you going this year?
Well, I'm ear deep into the history stuff. As we had talked about before, so for everybody that doesn't know this, when cool people are doing cool things on the weekends, I'm ear deep in late 1800s, early 1900s books and magazines on sales, marketing, advertising, sales leadership. I've got a collection. If for anybody who's listening and not watching, my background here in like the whole office looks like a library. My wife is a saint for putting up with the crap that I get delivered by eBay and Abe Books all the time. But that has become a real passion. And so what I've been doing is, taking the transparency stuff, which is the behavioral science of how we as human beings engage, prioritize, and then ultimately trigger purchase decisions. And then marrying that, like we use that for good, not evil in sales and marketing, or at least we should. And I know we're going to talk about that, but marrying that with the lessons of the past, because it's so interesting that, we're reliving a number of different economies that we had lived through 100, 120 years ago, 80 years ago, 60 years ago. And unfortunately, we've forgotten about those. We're making the same mistakes over again. And gosh, if we've got an opportunity to learn from the past and avoid those mistakes and prepare for what the future looks like through that lens, I think it's an incredible opportunity. And so my focus has shifted from just the transparency and transparent leadership stuff to like, hey, let's merge that with the lessons from the past so we can be smarter people going into the future. And we're not talking about the same crap 60 years from now.
Hi, and thanks for joining us for the show. I'm Paul, founder here at Javelin Content Management. We specialize in getting ideas out of your head, down into video, and out to your social media through repurposing and efficient content strategies. If you want to find out how you can convert your ideal audience into paying customers, reach out to us, javelincontent.com, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Absolutely. And when I hear you talk about behavioral science, I get all excited because that's the bit that really triggered me when I heard you first talking on that podcast. And the transparency side of things plays into that really nicely. There's a lot of business owners that are out there who just have no idea how powerful behavioral science is and what it can do for them. That's probably a conversation, a whole other topic, a whole other podcast for another day. And I think you've triggered me. I've got a couple of good friends who are behavioral scientists. I'm gonna have somebody on to kind of bring that to life a bit. Bearing in mind the sales history that you're reading at the moment, like what's your favorite story? And I know you've got a few real belters that I've seen you put out on LinkedIn. What's your favorite sales story?
Well, I've got like a billion favorites, but given your audience that we're talking about CEOs and founders and marketing and all of that, I'm going to tell you a new one that for anybody, by the way, if you're a super nerd, my outlet is the Sales History Podcast. I do it as a hobby. It's just my outlet for all this crap that's floating around in my brain. Depending on when you release this episode, I've just released an episode called How Founder-Led Sales Changed the World. Founder-led sales literally changed the world. And in it, I tell stories of people like James Watt and his, he invented the steam engine. Brilliant mind, right? Engineering mind to invent this. But what had to happen was James Watt had to be an expert seller and marketer, right? Like that had to happen. Otherwise, everybody was laughing at this thing. Like, what the heck is that? He literally developed the concept of ROI. He was the guy that developed the calculation for what a horsepower is. And horsepower is still a term that's used today. There's guys like Cyrus McCormick in the Reaper. The Reaper is used on farms everywhere. It's obviously come a long way since the 1700s. But I tell the story of how literally nobody wanted this thing. They were like, that's stupid. He went to a public exhibition, I believe in London, to show this thing off. The London Times said, oh, this guy freaking presented this thing. And it was ridiculous. It's like a flying machine. It's so dumb. Like they literally tore this thing to shreds and it's literally revolutionized the world. A great inventor, but more importantly, as a founder, as a CEO, as a leader, these individuals had to be even better and more creative salespeople and marketers to be able to take this to market. One more that I thought was hilarious is Gustavus Swift, he was the guy that invented refrigerated train cars. And the fact that, gosh, what a tough, refrigerated train cars. So instead of having to ship cattle, you could slice it up, put it in, it makes things so much more efficient. It's such a big problem that had such an easy solution. However, what was the problem? Everybody had already bought cattle cars. So what are they going to do? Just let's dump those and buy these more expensive. And so his process that he had to go through to convince people that their sunk cost of cattle cars had to go away because refrigerated refrigerated train cars were going to be the way of the future. And again, revolutionized everything. So that's just a recent example, a recent lesson that I've come across that for your audience, I think it should inspire you, but also realize that you could be the brains of the operation. As we talk about transparency, it doesn't mean you got to go get a plaid jacket and some gold chains and get all gross because you got to sell it. Now, these people didn't. You don't need to do that either. Being a human being is the way of the future, the way that sales has always been and always should be.
it's just a mindset as to how you influence people in the right way to change their mindset so that you're not working against them, but you're working with them to help them understand new ideas that mean that they're not wrong. They just didn't have the full picture.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that. So
Right. Exactly.
kind of bringing it back to
Yep.
transparency then. For those who haven't read the transparency seal, first of all, the link will be in the podcast notes, and I can't recommend the book enough to anybody who's starting out in that journey. Who's, a lot of small businesses, the founder, and I say this all the time, your founder and your CEO is absolutely, for a long time, your best salesperson, and it will help you become more efficient. And there's a lot of ideas in the transparency seal that kind of turn things on its head, not least of which was time to lose, right? Everybody's mad keen on tracking how long it takes to win a deal. How long from start conversation to win that conversation? And you flip that on its head and ask people, well, how long does it take you to lose the deals that you're going to lose? What's your time to lose? That for me was really powerful. And I think that applies across marketing as well as sales, right?
Yeah, let's talk first about, let's define what this transparency thing means for everybody, because, transparency is an overused word. It's often confused with authenticity, which is also important, but completely different. And here's what transparency means. All right, and I'll tell it through the lens of the market research that led me to the conclusion, but let's maybe tell a B2C story too that make it relatable. So let's just start with the research. Paul, as you mentioned at the beginning, I was the CRO of Power Reviews in Chicago. We're in the review space, right? You've probably interacted with the tech before. You're buying a pair of Crocs or, sweater on Vineyard Vines or 1,000 other retailers. When you look at the product, you scroll down, there's reviews. That was us doing the collect and display for them and 1,000 retailers and brands. What happened was, and again, I was the CRO. I wasn't even thinking about this study, but we engaged with a local university here in Chicago, Northwestern University, just to look at what does a consumer do when a website's acting as a salesperson? So you got a website, you're selling something, what do people do? 3 data points came out of it, 2 of which changed my life like could only happen to a nerd, right? Like I quit my job like a lunatic and wrote a book. A data point number 1 for all of you is you're probably all review readers, right? You're buying something you haven't bought before. At the time, it was 96% of us will read reviews first, right? We want to get some other opinions on this thing. But the 2 data points that changed my life, okay, number 1 was, are you one of those weirdos that reads the negative reviews first? You skip the 5s, you read the 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s first. Well, turns out it doesn't make you a weirdo, it makes you a human being. We all do that. We literally seek out the negative reviews, and many of us go there first. And the last data point was on a 5-star scale, and this is across all product categories, some skew higher, some skew lower, but when the average review score of a product is between a 4.2 and a 4.5, that's optimal for purchase conversion. What I want you to hear there is a product that has negative reviews will sell at a higher conversion rate than a product that has nothing but perfect 5-star reviews. And so I looked at that and I was like, all right, that's when a website's acting as a salesperson. Why do we go to the negative first? And why do we actually need the negative to be able to trigger a purchase decision? And wait, does that apply to human or B2B selling too? And so I started digging into the behavioral science of it. I found a local neuroscientist that works at a university, and I was like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And he dug through, he got me some research that's tagged in the first book, but turns out it applies to human selling too. That when we, this idea of transparency, it actually sells better than trying to be perfect. Leading with what you give up to be great at your core. Leading with what maybe a competitor does better than you. Leading with, if you're at a high price point, setting that pricing expectation. Whatever it is, when we clear the elephant in the room, we clear that and we lead to the value instead of leading with it, magic happens in our brains. Now, it's not a trick. It's not a gimmick. We as human beings are prediction machines. We buy when we can predict, not when we're convinced. And so when you think about your role as a seller or a marketer, your job is not to convince that you're all things to all people and you're always a perfect 5-star, because our brains won't trigger a purchase decision that way, because subconsciously we know that perfection doesn't exist. And so we got to go find the negative to them, right? And so I'll stop there for a second, and I'll give you an example, a B2C example that I think businesses in B2B don't think about, don't leverage. But thoughts on that, Paul, before I do?
So many things I want to jump off on, and like honestly, Todd, we could talk for hours on all of these subjects. I think for me that it creates that capability to come across as genuine and honest, and I think that's something we all crave. We've all been stung by bad deals that seem too good to be true, but we did it anyway because let's take that risk. And the higher the purchase price, the more important that is for us. And so for me, it's about two things. And I do exactly that. I ask ChatGPT to do it for me now, right? Like, go and have a look at the reviews and tell me what people are saying is bad.
Yes.
TripAdvisor, if I've gone on holiday, tell me from 2020 to 2023, what was it like in the summer holidays for this particular site? I did that 2 weeks ago. It worked really well. Can I get an honest review of what's wrong with this place? Can I bear what's wrong with it? If there is things that's wrong with it, are they tolerable for the upsides? And are they niched enough that they know what I want? And I think that's important for B2B. I come across a lot of resistance for people to, as you'll probably call it, niche, right? Like niche down to something specific. So I got told I needed to work with business coaches. They're a great business partner for me. And then I start to look at business coaches and I realize that business coaches themselves is quite a big category. So we need to go nicher again. And the more you niche down, the closer you come to being able to speak to just that group of people and being very good at that one thing that everybody's afraid to do. But it magnetizes that bunch of folks who are there. They are your customers and they will never move away. And it doesn't mean that nobody else will come to you. It just means that these people here will absolutely identify and align with you. And I just think it transformed me as well. When you start talking about transparency and like you can apply it to so many things across life, not just sales and marketing, like it just applies to loads of things.
Yeah, for anybody that wants to influence anybody to do anything, used for good, not evil, it's so powerful because again, it's helping us predict. And the example I wanted to share, you're all familiar with, but let's talk about everybody's favorite retailer in the world, IKEA. Wait, not your favorite? Like, it's a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk in, they got to give you a map. You're in for hell on earth. You can't find what you're looking for because they purposely design it that way. When you find what you're looking for, nobody to help you feng shui your living room or whatever. You got to take a picture of the tag or write down the code of where you're going to find it in the warehouse, pull the massive box onto a cart that doesn't have brakes, pull your car in backwards and jam it in the back of it Tetris style while F-bombing your partner, your spouse, whoever, driving home, opening the box, there's 150 parts in there, and the only word on the work instructions is like Svarta or whatever Scandinavian, right? It's a freaking nightmare. Then you're like, oh, you get this whole thing assembled and you're like, you know what? This looks great. Hey, honey, we should go get the end tables for this bedroom set. Like, what are you, nuts? Well, IKEA is the #1 furniture retailer in the world for 14 straight years. Why? Because of that idea that you were talking about. It's not a big funnel, right? People don't walk in there going, I need a salesperson to help me design a modern, like, no. What they do is they brand to the world what they give up to be great at their core. But this is the marketing element of what makes IKEA so powerful. They tell the world you're going to find it, pick it, pack it, shove it, assemble it. But we do that so we can give you modern Scandinavian designed furniture that you didn't pay much for. And there's good meatballs too. But besides that, the idea for all of us that I don't see enough B2B companies embracing is, hey, like, why can't we tell the market, hey, this is going to be that, Paul, you're kind of doing this, right? This is going to be our core. The customers that want this, we want to be the best in the world for. There's stuff on the outside here that maybe we're not as good at. And if those are going to be the important components, I will gladly make the connection for you if you'd like. That's what I've done in my own business, right? Like it's just the way that I think, that you might jam your way into one deal that you're not a perfect fit for and get that short-term revenue. But when that customer finds out that there's maybe a better option and you didn't tell them, you get that deal, but it might cost you 5 more you never knew existed because that one person, their ability to blowhorn, share feedback on websites, B2B review websites are everywhere now, or just go to their buddies and go, I bought this thing. It kind of sucks. Those 5 people in their peer network are never calling you.
Yeah.
Right. So I believe transparency sells better than perfection, but you got to do it anyway. Right. It's the 2020s, 2024. Like you can't get away with fibbing your way into a deal and hope that the long term is going to win, because it's not.
I love that. Again, I could break off onto so many different side tracks and subjects, but yeah, I every time we chat, we cover something different, and I really enjoy the conversations that we have. So I guess looking to the future then, Todd. So you've said that you kind of believe in applying the lessons of sales history to sales now and marketing now, and what can we learn from that, and what big trends do you see shaping the future of sales and marketing from here on? Like, we've seen the advent of AI, and maybe that's what it was drummed up to be. Maybe it wasn't. What do you see happening in the not too distant future?
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the history of how the sales and marketing community has ruined stuff, you could probably guess what's happening. And so what I mean by that is, over my left shoulder here, for anybody looking, that's I drove a long way to get that. It's a 1908 cathedral style telephone. And I use it as, and by the way, it's got original wiring in it. It rings, like the thing is so cool. But I use it kind of as a reminder around how sales and marketers ruin everything. Meaning, Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, he created the greatest technology revolution for the sales world of all time when he made the first phone call. Right now, it took until the 1910s. The telephone was actually being used in like outbounding, B2C, B2B type cold calling, that kind of stuff. The first examples I found in 1912 and 1914 of that. But by the 1920s and 30s, we had ruined it, right? Like the telephone was this great thing where I didn't even have to put shoes on. I could start selling, I could stay right here. How efficient, how amazing. And then we start using it for scale and evil instead of good. And now there's resistance built up, right? Dr. Shirley Jackson in the 1960s created the technology that led to caller ID. So we could see like, oh, unknown caller, I'm not answering that. No, nobody answers their home phone anymore or any unrecognized phones because sales and marketers ruined. Fast forward to the 1970s, right? Ray Tomlinson, 1971, sends out the first email. What an incredible gift to the sales and marketing world, right? Like, unbelievable. I could type something, hit send, and it shows up in their inbox instantly. How awesome. How long did it take us to ruin that, right? Like, 1975 was when a guy at DEC first spammed. And, by the 2000s, we needed, here in the US, at least where I am, they had to create legislation in the Canned Spam Act to prevent it. There was all kinds of technologies built to prevent it. On the phone side, the do not call registry here in the US, which was designed because sales and marketers suck and ruin the phone, had 221 million telephone numbers on it in 2021. Like, Alexander Graham Bell would be rolling over in his grave if he knew that. You could see it with LinkedIn, like LinkedIn, this incredible gift. We screw that up. Video. I started getting videos after video started showing its way into the sales and marketing world, where some jerk face would send me a 30-second video, like a 3-minute video. And it would start with, like, in the background would be my LinkedIn profile. And it would start with, hey, you have a really impressive background. And like, it's a generic thing that they just did at scale. And I'm like,
just recorded you a video.
Again.
No,
it's a long way of saying, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's nauseating. The prediction here is that we're already doing that with AI. Like, you can see it. There's some people that are using it for good. I think there's incredible applications to use it for good. Just like you said, Paul, around doing your homework, doing research, prepping for a client call or a client visit. I use it for that all the time, and it saves me time. It's amazing in that regard. But on the back end, gosh, the number of companies that are right now in garages creating technology that is going to be designed to send personalized outbound emails at scale. Those two words don't go together. Like, stop it. There's like 400 companies building that right now. We are ruining it. We are going to ruin it again. And hopefully sanity prevails and we use it for good, not evil. But again, history repeating itself, we're going to ruin AI in some fashion. We're going to need technologies designed to prevent it. And then the government's going to have to step in like they have with every other technology.
Sounds exhausting, that future. I don't know. I don't think I can be bothered with that. Like, punch my chip, I'm out. I'm out of that. Awesome.
I can't imagine what, inboxes are going to look like, like email inboxes in the next 12 months, executive inboxes are going to be disgusting. Like there's going to need to be technology that recognizes AI generated emails and clears them out. Something's going to happen because it's coming.
Well, we're just going to have
we can count on
AI gatekeepers now, right? It's going to be like, I'm the gatekeeper of Paul's inbox, and you're not getting in here unless you could prove you're not AI. Well, of course I'm not AI. And the two AIs would be having conversations instead of me with the salesperson. Who knows where it's all going to go. So now we move on to the two questions that I ask every guest that comes on the show, Todd, and be interested to see what your thoughts are. What is one marketing tactic, marketing methodology, marketing framework, marketing tool? What in your advice would be something that you wish small businesses would just stop trying to do in order to be successful, because it just doesn't work?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much, dude. Hey, I guess the one thing that I think can be useful for all marketers to just think about is embrace what you give up to be great at your core. Figure out that you're not all things to all people. And when somebody gives you a negative review or gives you negative feedback, own it, embrace it, and maybe even use it. And so the short version of that is not only don't get pissed and go, you're an idiot when somebody leaves you a bad review, own it, do something about it. And like that is so powerful. And then even you could use it in your marketing, right? There's incredible marketing organizations that do that really well. But the other piece for all of you is, we talked a little bit about wins versus losses. I don't think organizations do enough to truly understand why they lose deals. Most of us, especially if you're a founder and you lose a deal, we have this kind of complex that's like, hey, you just didn't see the value. You're an idiot. That's not why you lost the deal, right? We've got to own the reasons and own the, hey, if I was able to spin the world backward, what would I do differently here, right? And if we can't answer that question, then maybe we need to look at the profile of the individual and the company and their circumstances and understand that, hey, companies that look like this, that have this going on, are not a good fit for us. We should lead with it. If they're an inbound, and say, hey, listen, over and over again, companies like yours and individuals like you, here's what you don't like about us. Now, if that's you, cool, let's part as friends and I'll get you into the right direction. If it's not you, let's keep talking. Yeah. That transparency becomes so powerful, but you gotta celebrate the losses for the lessons that can be learned and embrace what you give up to be great at your core. The best marketers do that. And I think it's such an opportunity to stand out and be the.
And that, something that I preach a lot about. I mean, I'm a big fan of using video from a personal context to get the message out there. And I'm a big fan of shouting about who my ideal customers are, who they're not. And I advise all my clients to do the same thing, talk about who's a good fit, who's not a good fit, and why, and just air that out for everybody to see in a non-confrontational way. Just be honest about it and just get it out there so that you can concentrate on the conversations that matter, because those people might go, this guy's not for me. Exactly. I hoped he was, but he's not, clearly. I'm going to move on to the next guy, but I might still recommend him because I like his style.
Yeah, well, can I add one thing that just happened to me a little bit ago? And just when you said, I hope you're a fit, I had the CRO of a multi-billion-dollar company reach out to me. Actually, his admin reached out and was like, hey, he wants to talk to you about doing some training in here. And I'm like, wow, that's a big, I get all excited, right? You get the endorphins going. I get on the phone with this guy and he starts by saying, hey, Todd, I wanted to reach out. I've heard great things about you. We want to bring you in and do some training. And then he starts sharing what his objectives are. Like we start digging into that. Like what are the kind of the top of mind thing that you need some help with? And it was cold calling, social selling, top of funnel stuff. Okay? I could do it, but I'm not the best at it. So my answer was literally this. Hey, That sounds like a great priority that you have, and I'm with you. There's a lot of companies that have that. I could train that, but if you made a list of the top 50 people that do it, I'd come in at about number 47. I know of 2 or 3 people that are fantastic at it that I would love to make the recommendations for. You should go there. This guy looked at me like, that's awesome. I would love those names. Like, he was so excited about it. But then he was like, what is it you focus on? Like, where's your area? And so I took them through it. Like, this transparency stuff is non-traditional. Your messaging, your positioning, the buying journey that you take customers on. And then the popular thing that I teach is transparent negotiating, right? Which is probably a topic for another day. But we ended up at the end of the conversation, I made the connection, and he brought me in, and we're still doing programs for his team on transparent negotiating.
Realized they needed both.
Right. So it's not a case of you just going, not for me, go away. You build trust, and they end up coming back around to you anyway. You got to play the long game on this. And now his organization objectives are being hit and being met and being exceeded because your role is to be a partner, to be an advisor to them, not be this gross, hey, only look at me, nobody else. Even though I suck at this, I'm going to do it anyway. No, you can't do that anymore.
Amen. Amen. I love it, Todd. Anybody who's listening to the show who does want to hear a little bit more about how you could work with them, or a little bit more about the Sales History podcast, where can they connect with you these days?
ToddCaponi.com is a good place to start. There's all kinds of nerdery all over that. The blog is my outlet. Check out the Sales History podcast if you like that kind of nerdery. It's just me monologuing for 12 to 20 minutes each episode. I dig in, I research, and then I get it all out there. So you can find that anywhere that you listen. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I share a lot of stuff there if that helps too. But yeah, would love to help out any way I can. And I'm pretty hard not to find.
Awesome. Thanks very much for your time, Todd. Been a great guest. Thanks for sharing.
Thanks for having me, brother. Good seeing you.
Take care. And thanks very much to everybody who's listening along, watching the videos. Been great to have you along. And again, as ever, if you want to reach out and suggest a guest, maybe somebody you know, maybe it's yourself, feel free to reach out. We'd love to have you on the show. Or any topics or strategies that you want us to cover as part of what we're doing. I'm more than happy to find a guest that can talk to those points. I'll see you next week on MarketPulse Pros and Pioneers.
Thanks for joining us for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to feature on a future show, or you've got some ideas for folks who would make a great guest, please drop us a line. The contact details are in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Your host today was Paul Banks, founder at Javelin Content Management. Javelin specializes in helping busy business owners just like you to repurpose video content, taking all the stress and tech problems away, and turning your long-form video into literally hundreds of pieces of content without breaking the bank. If you want to launch your personal brand, become the vendor of choice for your audience, or maximize your sales revenue impact, we'd love to hear from you. Join us next week for the next episode, and don't forget to give us a subscribe and a review. Our podcast is only possible with your support.